Attention Task Force Commander. Escort the support ship and floating workshop to the carrier. Over. Attention Engineer. Restore the carrier to operational condition. Attention Arsenal and Aviator. Deliver ammunition and resupply the
force detected.
Over.
Enemy cruiser sighted. Concentrate fire on the enemy warship. Enemy cruiser sunk.
Torpedoes to start.
This is Engineer. Got to the scene. Commence repairs.
All stations, concentrate fire on the target.
This is Engineer. The carrier's propulsion is partially restored. Stay close.
Cruiser foundered. Much obliged. Problem solved, sir.
Torpedoes astern.
Repel air attack. Ship is on fire. Good luck and fair seas.
General
Many
quarters.
thanks. The ship is on fire! Problem solved, sir. Concentrate fire on the target. Attention, reporting the target position.
Enemy destroyer detected.
Spotter returning to ship. Concentrate fire on the enemy warship.
Enemy battleship sighted.
ship is on fire! Has taken the lead. The enemy is about to win. win.
Action stations.
Enemy battleship detected. Enemy destroyer detected. Enemy cruiser.
Fighter airborne.
Enemy battleship sighted.
Problem solved, sir. Main turret critically damaged.
quarters.
Enemy cruiser sighted. Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy destroyer sighted. Enemy cruiser sighted.
Target penetrated. solved, sir.
Our victory is in sight.
Action stations.
Good luck and fair seas. Many thanks.
Warship detected. Enemy destroyer detected. Enemy cruiser sighted.
Intelligence data.
Enemy cruiser detected. Enemy battleship detected. Enemy destroyer detected. Enemy battleship detected. Enemy cruiser sighted.
The ship is on fire!
Fighter destroyed. Main turret critically damaged. Torpedoes astern. Torpedoes to starboard.
Enemy battleship detected. Enemy destroyer detected. Enemy battleship detected. Enemy cruiser sighted. Enemy battleship sighted.
Attention. Reporting the target position. Spotter returning to ship.
The ship is on fire! Sir.
The ship is on fire!
Our team is taking the lead. Our team is taking the lead.
stations. Reporting the position of a strategic target.
Enemy cruiser sighted.
Concentrate fire on the enemy warship.
Our team has taken the lead.
Enemy battleship sighted.
Enemy cruiser destroyed.
Concentrate fire on warship. All stations, reporting the position of a strategic target. All stations, requesting fire on the designated target.
We've destroyed an enemy cruiser.
Enemy cruiser sighted.
Our victory is in.
Problem solved, sir. The ship is on fire!
general quarters.
All forces, capture that area. Good luck and fair seas. Many thanks.
Much obliged, Commander. Set a smoke screen. Set a smoke screen.
All stations, proceed to capture that area.
Set a smoke screen. Affirmative. Denied.
All stations, reporting the position of a strategic target.
Enemy battleship detected. Battleship sighted. Enemy cruiser detected. Enemy destroyer sighted.
All stations, reporting the position of a torpedoes to port.
Action stations.
Problem solved, sir. Our victory is in sight.
I need help. All stations requesting fire on the designated target.
Hello. In between all these Soviet DDs and all this ranked play, I decided to feature a ship that I felt like I didn't give the proper justice to the last time I covered it. It's of course the Montana. And now I'm still using the same build, the same captain perks, the same modules, the same upgrades and everything as I did in my 0.60 commentary. I can link it below if you're wondering what build I'm using. Now, I felt like I didn't really give the ship justice because I still see people act like this overall is a bad ship, whereas the Montana is quite a strong ship, in fact. The only weakness it really has is how it deals with other tier 10 battleships. For example, the Yamato will overmatch its bow, and the Yamato has a much easier time citadeling it, and whereas the Montana will struggle to penetrate the armor on the Yamato in return. And the Kurfürst, well, it has kind of taken over the brawling role from the Montana. The Montana used to be the best brawler, but then the Kurfürst came in with its massive secondaries, Hydro and Turtleback, making it extremely hard to citadel. So the Montana lost a lot of ground there. So yes, it still struggles against other tier 10 battleships. But that does by no means mean that it's a weak battleship. It's most certainly is not, and it's a massive threat to any other ships on the server. And I feel like people tend to underestimate this a bit much. In fact, I've been playing the Montana a lot more lately because I quite enjoy it, because it's not as straight up face roll as the Yamato is, where you can just point and click and you get massive damage. Or the Kurfürst, where the Kurfürst feels too big and clumsy right now. I've been quite enjoying playing the Montana as of late. Now, the enemy has two battleships giving broadside. I picked the Amagi, of course. The Amagi does have turtleback armor these days, which means at close range it's quite hard to citadel it. However, at these ranges, when the shells are able to plunge, you have no issues bypassing that turtleback and just punishing the ship heavily in something like a Montana. The Iowa, the North Carolina, they can pretty much all pull it off. I think even smaller caliber guns can citadel the Amagi at these ranges. At close range, of course, the turtleback kicks in, but these ranges not really an issue. It looks like they're about to collide, so I'm just gonna throw the shells in between them both. Yeah, Bismarck slowed down, so he ate the brunt of the damage instead. Bismarck, of course, at this range, maybe you can citadel him, you can bypass his turtleback, but most of the time you're still just going to be able to do heavy damage to him, whereas not landing citadels. Now the enemy, in case you didn't notice, the enemy does have a Yamato, and if you look at the minimap, you can see that he's actually setting up for a very fairly offensive position near B, where his bow is pointed basically towards our entire fleet, and his broadside is protected by the islands, which is a fairly good position. Citadeling the Amagi again. You can't give that much broadside to something like a Montana. I'm of course running the reduced dispersion module, but we're still talking 12 guns on a 30-second reload timer, so that's a lot of damage that's going to be railing in. And I mean, we're what, 4 minutes into the game, and I've already done 63,000 damage to these two battleships. So they have been crippled quite heavily. And that's just, of course, my damage. So people still tend to underestimate the Montana, like quite heavily underestimate it. In fact, when they see a Yamato, they avoid and turn, and they don't really even want to take the fight. But when they see a Montana, for some reason, they tend to still underestimate it, which I'm perfectly fine with, because if you underestimate this thing, you're in for a world of pain. Now, the anti-air on the ship is... it's supposed to be its strength, but really the biggest issue right now is that you can't really defend yourself against the carrier. I mean, you have enough anti-air that carriers will rarely choose to pick on you first, because it will cost them planes. But if a carrier really wants to kill you, if you don't have help, you are going to die. There is little doubt about that. If you notice, by the way, my positioning here, I'm using the islands to hide myself, so I'm constantly shooting, but I'm in fact not detected. And that's because I'm arcing my shells over the islands, and of course I'm using the islands to protect me from torpedoes, from things like the Benson, which was contesting A. Hopefully my cruisers will be able to kill him, although it's looking a bit shaky. Donskoy, showing broadside, gonna see if I can punish him. This is a very awkward angle to shoot at, because he's sailing towards me, So you have to not only predict his horizontal movement, but also his vertical movement. Especially if he makes small turns like he did, suddenly your aim is completely off. Because I think it's one of the hardest angles to shoot at in general. He turns away, says in chat, no Flammo, no. But I'm gonna of course go for him again, because the Donskoy is a massive threat to my DDs. In general, in a battleship, you should always try to focus the enemy radar cruisers first. Radar cruisers are a huge threat to all your DDs, and they can cripple and kill your DDs very easily, and your DDs will love you for it if you always focus them first. So I always try to pick a fight with them first and try to make life easier for my DDs. And of course, if you do get smoked up yourself, or someone smokes up and you sail into the smoke, you'll be able to use it yourself as well if the radar cruisers are dealt with. I am detected. Of course, there's the Yamato. You can see I need to be very careful with always angling. The enemy has all the capture points, which is a bit problematic. That's because their DD is pushed quite aggressively into the capture points, and they were able to secure them. Now, Yamato always angle. Yes, he can overmatch you, but you don't want to give him full bow on, and you don't want to give him full broadside either. You want to give him an angle where he's forced to shoot at your broadside and where you can bounce it. So yes, you can bounce shells. I'm going for the blind shot at the Minotaur instead of shooting the Bismarck, in case you were wondering where I was aiming, and I did in fact land one over a pen. I am slowing down though, because with the Fletcher and the Minotaur there's a high probability of torpedoes being shot, and I don't feel like sailing right into the torps, so I'm stopping my ship and going to reverse. Minotaur's smokes runs out, and he is forced to flee, of course. Now, you don't need to be afraid of shooting at Minotaurs when they're sailing away like this. You can easily, if they sail straight away like this guy does, just aim right above them and shoot. Your plunging fire, as you can see, will plunge your shells from above straight through his deck and into his citadel. So that guy was in fact fairly lucky that he managed to survive that, because I did what, 36k damage. One more penetration and I would have one-shot him. So he was very lucky to get away. I did eat 2 of his torps though, but ultimately I do feel like I came out on top in that fight. Amagi hasn't learned his lesson. Isn't this the same guy that I double citadel or got 2 citadels on earlier? He is turning away at least. And this time he manages to bounce most of it. Now, I've been waiting for my chance. Of course, the issue here is there's a cyclone hitting soon. So pushing right into a Yamato, you can see this Yamato is nailing me from range. Pushing right into a Yamato is extremely risky in a Montana. But I've been waiting patiently here. I don't care that they have the cap advantage. I'm just waiting for this cyclone to hit. The warning came a while ago and the cyclone is striking now. So meanwhile, while I'm waiting, I'm just taking shots at anything that shows itself to me and making sure I remain angled towards that Yamato. He has disappeared. He disappeared from my vision. And it looks like, you see my vision is starting to disappear. If you look at the minimap, you can see chunks of my vision just disappeared and it's disappearing again. That means, of course, the cyclone is striking, and I'm going to use this to my advantage. Cyclone is striking, which means we finally have the stealth. And when it comes to a straight up brawling fight, if you manage to close the distance with the Yamato, you have a fairly good shot in the Montana. But otherwise you might struggle. I write in chat, push B now, together, B, B, B. And two of battleships on my team say affirmative. That's always good. So hopefully I will have people with me, because this is of course the time we need to capitalize on. B is fairly clear of enemies and the cyclone has struck, which means that the Yamato won't be able to punish me when I push in, and I'll be able to close the distance. So there are advantages to cyclones, big advantages, especially if you're in a Montana. Usually battleships tend to complain about cyclones, but especially for a Montana, it's fantastic. Oh, Benson. Instantly take the shot. Fairly easy shot, because you have 12 guns, and Montana is really good at deleting DDs, especially close range. You can just one-shot them very easily, just because of the sheer amount of shells you can pour out. And now Yugo finds their Minotaur. I think he was a bit too eager sailing into them, because, well, I think the island might have hit the Minotaur, so he gets wrecked by him, and we lose our Shimakaze to their gearing. So that's of course an issue. And here I make a fairly large miscalculation. And that's of course, we just saw a Minotaur, And I don't take into account that, yes, of course, the Minotaur might have launched blind torps, which is exactly what this Minotaur did. So he just threw out all his blind torps before he turned away. So I ate a massive chunk of damage, and I'm down to 13k HP. My heal is up though, and of course my repair. I haven't had any reason to use it, and I do manage to finish off their gearing as well. So at this point, I think that we have still a good push going on. The game is very, very even in terms of ships, and we're still behind on score. But I'm gonna take this moment when we got people pushing with me. I don't want to turn away, because usually if you turn away in random battles, the randoms are fairly afraid. Like random players are fairly afraid of pushing themselves. So if you turn away, usually they will slow down and the push will falter. So if you want to keep a push going, you kind of have to go ham. You have to go balls deep, no fear, no nothing. I'm hoping that this Yamato is still in the same position as he was last spotted, which was on the other side of these islands, because I'm now able to use these islands as cover. And I'm of course pushing hard into sea to help my Bismarck out, who's obviously fighting someone there. There are lots of smokes in here, which is of course to be expected with a gearing recently dead and a Minotaur somewhere. That's hardly surprising. But I can wait patiently and see if I might be able to take some shots here, because they don't know I'm here. I'm undetected. So, okay, the Yamato position is shown. More torpedoes coming our way. And finally, we get vision. The enemy Minotaur, full broadside like this, I think it gets hydroed by the Bismarck, and that's of course a very easy instant destruction of that Minotaur. However, now we get some real issues, namely an Iowa on my left and an Amagi on my right. The Amagi has less HP, and the Iowa is still behind the island, so I quickly take the target priority as the Amagi. He has 9000 HP and he is fairly angled, so I aim above his hull and I aim for his superstructure and his guns, and I do the 9000 damage just by penetrating his superstructure and guns and doing the damage there. You shouldn't try to go for hull on those kind of angles, because most likely he will bounce it or you will struggle getting the damage you need. Now, however, I'm against Iowa. He gives me so much broadside that I try to go for his citadel right on, but he does turn in just in time to negate the damage. But he also used his guns, so I turn right and take my back guns into it, and I intentionally shoot his turrets. You notice that I cripple his turrets, and that breaks his guns. And that's a huge advantage in a brawling type of fight like this, the fact that he only has one gun now because the other one was broken. So the other gun is still reloading. And you might notice here, he's able to shoot one gun, but unable to shoot both guns. And he does do, what was it, 8,000–9,000 damage to me with his one gun, but because the other gun was broken, he was unable to fire it, and thus he was unable to kill me, whereas I managed to finish him off. So always keep in mind when you're in those kind of brawling type of battles, or very close range battles, that damaging the enemy's guns is a very valid tactic, and it might in fact save your life like it did for me there. Now I finally got a really good position on this Yamato. This Yamato is, however, giving massive broadside to the North Carolina. In fact, he's giving massive broadside to everything. He sat in this position for too long, I feel, and now he's just being surrounded by everyone from everywhere. And that's of course one of the problems. If you hold a position for too long in a battleship, the enemy team will just flank and surround you, especially in a cyclone where you can't use the great strengths of the Yamato, which is the long range and penetrative power at long ranges against the enemy. Donskoy shows up. I go for him right away in case he tries to torp me. Don't really get the hits I want. 2 overpens and a bounce, very underwhelming. But I turn my guns in since I want to see if I can finish him off and maybe secure my 7th kill. Amusingly, of course, when you give broadside, that also brings all your secondaries into the battle, so all my secondaries start opening up. And hilariously, just before my shells land, my secondaries actually kill him off, which not only gives me high caliber, but also close quarters expert. So it ends up being only 180k damage in this game, which isn't that special, but amusingly 7 kills in this fairly aggressive and fairly short game. Team score wise, 2.7k basic. Hello. Now, the last time I featured the Yamato, it was mostly to make my point that this ship does not need any nerfs. But ultimately, I wasn't that satisfied with the commentary because while it did show the strengths of the ship, ultimately I don't think I gave enough information on how to play it. So in this one, I'm gonna mostly focus on how this ship is played. Now, the map we have, obviously I want my team to push B and C. Sadly, we have a couple gearings who would want to go A, which is something, of course, I don't recommend much, because the problem is pushing from A to B on this map is very, very rough, because there is a tight choke point. The matchmaking is heavily tier 10 focused in this game. If I remember correctly, they had like 4 tier 10s, including 2 Yamatos, Montana, a Grosse Kurfürst. So there's basically one of everything on the enemy team. I'm not going to bother wasting time sitting alone at A. I want to rejoin my team and support them at B and C. And this is something you always have to keep in mind on the Yamato. The Yamato isn't actually that good of a solo ship. It's not a good solo adventurer. First of all, well, the reload is pretty normal for a battleship, 30 seconds, and but it only has 9 guns. The turret arcs are okay, but most of the time you will be using mostly the front guns as you maneuver around the map. Since being able to use all the guns always, you have to expect the enemy to be right in front of your arcs in order to be using all your guns. Because if the enemy is far to one side or the other, the extremely slow turret traverse makes it very hard to switch targets. And that's another reason why you should not be pushing alone with this, because if you end up facing multiple targets and they end up pushing you, you have a very hard time of quickly switching targets. You see how slow my turret traverse is, and in fact I'm helping it out by actively turning to the right to not just I'm not forced to wait for just my turrets to turn, but I'm helping it out by turning my entire ship around. And this is a technique you end up having to use quite often if you quickly want to shoot someone situated to the left or to the right. You basically use your rudder shift to speed up this incredibly slow turret traverse. So this is by far the slowest out of all the tier 10 battleships, and that's of course a drawback that you need to keep in mind. What does slow turret traverse equal? Well, first of all, it means you have very set limits on what your firing arcs are and what you can shoot at. You are extremely vulnerable to sudden ambushes from other angles. For example, a DD popping up behind me here or popping up like from the other side is a huge issue for the Yamato because of this slow turret traverse. The ship is also quite clumsy, but then so are they all. It has a tighter turning circle than most of them, which is something you need to use quite a lot because unlike the Grosse Kurfürst and the Yamato, you don't have any convenient either turtleback citadel or extremely lowered citadel to fall back on. The Z-23, you saw when I made a turn to the left there, I was hoping I'd be undetected, but the Z-23 actually got me detected, which was a bit annoying and a bit unfortunate. I do manage to dodge all the shells, and luckily the enemy battleships are playing so super passive that they couldn't really punish me in any way. You can see how far back they are playing. I'm still continually moving. I had an unfortunate spawn at A, so I'm still continually moving over towards C, which is my initial goal. Because as I said, you want to play with your team. And the one thing the Yamato does have, the one strength it has, is this huge amount of threat. Because it has these 460mm guns, this huge threat of being able to overmatch any nose, being able to citadel pretty much any ship, means that it's very scary for the enemy team. So if you are on any flank, they will always have to keep in mind that if that ship shoots at me, I need to make sure he cannot absolutely devastate me. I give a bit too much broadside as I turn out here. There were more ships shooting at me than I expected, and I ate, I think, 1 citadel and a bunch of penetrations. Now, citadels are especially nasty to battleships because you can only heal 10% of the damage taken. So that was a bit of an unfortunate hit, and of course that is one of the weaknesses. Yugumo is shooting me, I'm pinging behind me for the gearing to please kill the Yugumo, because our gearing is literally right next to him, but he's just sitting there afraid of engaging him. Regardless, I finally start making my way towards A, and if you look at the enemy positioning, you see that they are all extremely far away. In fact, they are sailing around on the I line. Most of their big battleships are sailing around in the I. Some of them are, one or two are on the H line, but most are on the I line. So they are extremely far back. So there's really no point for me to push into the camp at this point, because, well, if I push in, I'm gonna get crossfired by all their base camping battleships. Not to mention that we have the 2 caps to 1, which means the enemy team needs to be the one to advance. And this of course suits the Yamato quite well, and in general this kind of long range fighting is something the enemy team should avoid, whereas this is something that suits the Yamato quite well. Even though this like super long range sniping isn't like a good thing for the meta, the Yamato is probably one of the best ships at it, because it has one of the best sigmas in the entire game, 2.1 sigma, and it has incredible penetration. The shells are also extremely heavy and with very little air drag. This means that the shell velocity remains very consistent in air, which means that you can pretty linearly increase how much lead you have to take when hitting different types of targets, and this means that you are very accurate, and good Yamato players can pretty much nail any target at any distance very consistently, and this of course makes it an extremely scary target to face. Kazama popped up, but he sadly disappeared. Now it's worth noting though that the Cyclone has hit and the Cyclone is about to strike. Well, the guns, of course, as I said, are a great strength. The Citadel is the great weakness. When it comes to brawling in general, raised Citadel or fairly large and raised Citadel combined with extremely slow turret traverse equals you do not want to brawl in the Yamato. The Yamato is the worst tier 10 brawling ship out of them all, by far. There's really no doubt about it, because you can, if a Montana catches you full broadside, he can one-shot you. If a Corfos catches you full broadside, he can one-shot you. If you catch either of those two full broadside, you will be lucky if you deal a quarter or a third of their health in a volley. That's pretty much it. That's the fundamental case there. If you put the Yamato broadside next to a broadside Montana and a broadside Corfurst and they all shoot at each other, the Yamato explodes instantly from the first volley from either ship, and whereas if they fight each other they have to duke it out, where the Corfurst eating a ton of AP penetrations and the Montana getting maybe one or two unfortunate citadels on the lowered citadel every now and then, but ultimately those two are very close. And the Montana is much more agile than the Kurfürst, but the Kurfürst on the other hand has more health and of course that turtleback. So those two are the brawling kings, but the Yamato is terrible at that. Now you notice that this Kurfürst was fairly far in the front, so I'm trying to push up to see if I could save him. The idea is of course, if someone is pushing and chasing the Kurfürst, me showing up would scare them away and make them disengage. Sadly, the Kurfürst had fires on him he couldn't repair, so he died before I could have any impact. Now you can't push into A alone. It's a Cyclone. In Cyclones, one of the best tactics is to blob up. You want to stay as a cohesive group, because if something comes in range, you want as many guns as possible to be able to shoot that target at once. If you push in alone in a Cyclone, you will suddenly face 3-4 ships at once, and your teammates won't be able to shoot because they can't even see them. So staying as a cohesive unit is the ultimate strength, which is why I'm more than happy to just sail next to sea, because ultimately I want to defend this sea cap, I want to hold it, and my vision range pretty much covers all of sea. However, behind me, a Friedrich der Grosse is starting to turn into the cap. If you look at the minimap, he's starting to turn in, and as I said, you never want to be alone. So because he's turning in, I'm also turning in, because if he pushes in, I need to push in as well, so we at least have these two battleships at the same time pushing in, cohesive unit going in, because it's very important that we stay together. Also, it's worth noting that German battleships are of course god tier at brawling. Azal pops up, he wants to be brave and try to contest the camp. Most battleships might struggle to pen Azal giving you angle and so forth. But of course, this is not an issue. You don't need to wait for broadside. You don't need to wait for some sort of special opportunity to fire with the Yamato. You just point and click and you delete him. No cruiser wants to be close range to a Yamato. Now though, there's a Yamato in front of us. Now it's very important to know that when there are islands like this, the one who pushes in first is at a disadvantage. The one who has to push his nose around the island and expose his broadside to the enemy is always going to be at a disadvantage. So obviously I don't want to be the first guy to push in, but I was hoping to back up this Friedrich der Grosse. But he decides to make a really strange U-turn. He doesn't slow down an angle or something, but he makes a full U-turn to the left and basically blocks or parks right in front of me. Now I can't keep sailing slowly forward as I was hoping, because I will block his reverse. So I have to stop and reverse away now, and well, our whole purpose pushing in kind of went out the window. I'm honestly very surprised that he didn't push in, because that Yamato over there would probably have been like a free kill for him. And once again, that's because Friedrich der Grosse can push in, give full broadside to the Yamato, he'll eat maybe 30k damage from his guns, but then he will fire back with like 4 or 5 citadels and pretty much delete the Yamato. And if the Friedrich der Grosse keeps sailing past the Yamato, then the Yamato turret traverse can't keep up, because as I said, the Yamato is terrible at brawling. So he would pretty much have had a free kill. So I of course expected him to be pushing in, but instead he made this decision. Okay, he's made his decision. Once again, there's no point for me to push in alone, because I don't want to be facing the Friedrich der Grosse and the Yamato at once while being forced to give my broadside. So instead I'm going to reverse and see if I can catch this Yamato, because once again the Yamato is now the first guy pushing in, and I want to use this advantage I have. This Friedrich der Grosse doesn't really understand why I'm surprised that he was doing this, but regardless, I'm turning around. The Mogami is his expected target, I hope. Yes, he does shoot the Mogami, so instead of firing early, I wait for an opportune moment, and only now do I fire. However, I get a bit unlucky. Out of 9 shells, I only land 5. I was so greedy for the Citadel, so I do get 5 Citadels, which is 74k damage, but it wasn't the devastating strike I hoped to get rid of him quickly, because there's 2 battleships pushing in from the other angle, which means I cannot angle myself fully nose in towards this Yamato as I would want to, but I already have to turn myself to angle against the 2 other battleships, which is why he was able to return Citadel damage to me and make life a lot harder. But it was a calculated damage hit I knew I had to take, because I could not risk giving broadside to the Montana, and I could not risk allowing the Montana get to my broadside with those 12 guns, because they have a very easy time fighting you. In a Montana versus Yamato, a brawl like this one, of course what you want to do is exactly what I'm doing here. You reverse, first of all, point nose in. If you point nose in, Montana can't do anything. Montana is helpless as a kitten when you point nose in. His best chance is trying to hit your superstructure or just loading HE and trying to HE spam you to death. He can do nothing. You, on the other hand, you see his nose. I'm aiming right to make sure that my shells hit his nose. Don't go for the broadside armor, because if he angles the broadside armor, he can bounce your shells. Just fire at the nose like I'm doing here. You can see I'm consistently penetrating. Not a single one of my shells is bouncing or shattering or even overpenning. It's just consistent penetrations and massive damage. So when you'd have to brawl a Montana, just play it like I do. Of course, if you get to the situation that he gets around you and he gets to your flank or to either broadside or even behind you, then life gets really hard. So I had to ensure that doesn't happen, and that's why I reversed away and made sure my nose was pointed in. It's very important in fights like that. Atago, he has a broken engine. Note the suit, the fire coming out of the smokestacks. That means a broken engine, so I take a very small lead when I shoot at him. And I managed to score a pen and a Citadel, but sadly I do not get the kill. But that doesn't matter, since, well, we were down a couple ships, and now we actually have a ship lead, which won't last long. And now we're even again. The Cyclone has faded. I'm trying to get rid of this Edinburgh. I should become undetected if we kill him, so that's why I'm trying to get rid of him as soon as possible. He is smoking up though. The scary thing is the Yamato on the left is pushing in, so I have to turn, and you notice I'm turning as hard as I can, and I was going faster earlier, but I've kind of dropped to half speed. I'm hoping to throw off the shells of this Yamato, because I am expecting him to shoot at me. I will be his priority target. and his shells do arrive, but thanks to turning in sharply the way I did, his shells land a bit too high, because I guess he wasn't expecting the full turn, and I managed to juke them. Now here we have an important lesson of one of the weaknesses of the Yamato. When you fight Yamato versus Yamato, you don't want to go full nose in, because Yamato can overmatch the nose. Now the front of the Yamato citadel is like half an octagon shape, like a trapezoid shape. He gets penetrations, you notice, but I'm aiming at that weakness. You see where my shells are aiming? Right next to, on the right side of the front turret, there's a weakness in the citadel, and if he has this angle, you can penetrate it. And you notice that was my third citadel on him. Even though he had a huge health pool advantage over me, I had very little health left. I was still able to completely dominate him in this 1 versus 1 fight. And towards the end, I turned in nose as much as possible to make it very hard for him to score any sort of lucky citadel towards the end, which could kill me. And I kill him off, and I do secure my Kraken with that game. And now there's a Khabarovsk left. Now, to many of you, it might seem like a ridiculous idea to hit a Kaba. That's so far away. Like, how far away is this guy? I'm waiting for my gun to get repaired. He says, nice shot. I give him a smiley face, but ultimately, knowing how the citadel works is very important. I'll show you guys. I'll actually show you in the client what the citadel looks like, so you understand what I'm talking about and why you have to make sure of your angling when you're fighting not just other battleships, but especially in Yamato versus Yamato fights like this one, and how you can come out on top in this fight. It's very important. Now, as I was saying, hitting Kaba is of course the fastest ship in the game, and hitting something like a Kaba in a Yamato might seem like a completely impossible idea. But as I said, the shells are very heavy. They have a very consistent speed, and of course the accuracy is fantastic, and the dispersion is very tight. So if you do manage to either catch a DD sailing in a straight line, or you have managed to predict his moves correctly, you might be surprised. See, look at him, I predict he's going to turn to the right, to turn away from the Yamato is fighting. So after I shoot, let's watch him. He starts turning to the right, just as I predicted. And thanks to my prediction and this fantastic shell accuracy, I am actually able to nail this guy pretty much perfectly. At 21 kilometers, I kill a Khabarovsk. So the guns, people don't understand just how strong these guns are, and I'm hoping to really make people understand that these guns are the reason why this only 16. Nice to get that from one single game. Anyway, I'll show you my recommended build, including that, of course. Usually I like to angle around like this, something like this. It makes it, basically I try to put this edge that's between these two towards the enemy. That makes it slightly harder for them to get either citadel. Alternatively, you can go with a surprisingly wide broadside like this, and just count on this heavy armor to bounce the shells. Or you can go full nose in. Yes, I did mention that he could get a citadel, but this is honestly a pretty small target, and when you fight another Yamato, there's going to be probably random citadels involved. Depends of course on the distance, but if you're fighting close range, it might even be just the safest to go nose in. Yes, he might get some citadels, but he's probably going to get them regardless. There's really no completely safe way of fighting another Yamato. Some of the examples I've showed can use, as well as the way I played against him. Note that what was important when I fought against him was I was moving, 2, I was changing course like this. When I was fighting against him, I constantly changed course like this. What this means is of course that he has to struggle between trying to pen my nose or trying to pen here. So when I constantly change course like this when I sail towards him, he has a hard time hitting a moving target. Hitting one that's maneuvering like this on the exact small area that you're supposed to hit is very, very hard. Whereas he was basically standing still and then reversing, which made him a very easy target. So keep in mind that even though you're a big, bulky battleship, you should still try to use that maneuverability to make yourself at least slightly harder to hit. Anyway, that was the basics of survivability and working around the weakness. Moving on to my captain, of course, my basic Yamato captain, premium all consumables, including spotter plane for shooting ships in smoke or behind islands. Upgrade wise, secondaries, because the main guns never get broken, and I don't really see a point in this damage control mod, since the duration increase is only 4 seconds. So secondaries, keep your secondaries and your anti-air alive longer. Better gun accuracy, faster gun reload, tankiness, and stealth. Now some might want to use steering gears. Because of all the HE spam and carriers and all the random garbage, I prefer the additional tankiness, because most of the time you are going to be playing fairly stationary in the Yamato, and being able to withstand the incoming fire is more important. Captain perks wise, I like priority target. I've been using it lately on battleships a lot, mostly because it lets you know when DDs are targeting you and when they're switching to torpedoes. Second, turret traverse. Your default turret traverse is, as I said, absolutely abysmal. Like, I think on the Kurfürst I don't even... Wait, is it Kurfürst.Montana? I actually don't even take the turret traverse because I can get away with not using it. But on the Yamato it's not really even a question. You have to get it because the default turret traverse... Well, the turret traverse with this perk is 62.6 seconds. So more than a minute just to turn them 180 degrees. So this is very much necessary. Follow it up with Superintendent and Stealth. Once you have these, build into Fire Prevention to withstand that HE spam. AR, you can probably get AR before that actually, because AR is such a extremely valuable perk that increased reload is just too valuable. And finally get Vigilance to deal with that torpedo threat. Flag wise, the priority flags are of course additional healing, additional fire, being able to withstand more fire hits, and faster reload on heal and repair. Now, additional things you could run here, you can run secondary flag, because I have so many, that's why I run them. I don't really consider the secondaries particularly valuable. You could run a speed flag. These are pretty much the most important. Additionally, you could run AA flag. These aren't like bad additions, but they're not nearly as important. The three most important are fire, heal, and faster consumables. And then I run a bunch of XP flags, of course. Anyway, that was my, I don't know, Art of the Yamato, I don't know what to call it, but a more in-depth guide on how you're supposed to play this incredibly strong battleship that I still consider possibly the best battleship in the game. I'm undecided because it's situational. There are situations.
The Japanese archipelago, 20 years in the future.
Hello everyone. Having finally covered the entire Pan-Asian DD line, I think it's time to return to some of our older ships. In this case, I will be featuring the Yamato. Now the matchmaking isn't exactly in my favor, considering the enemy has 5 DDs, which is pretty much nightmare status for any battleship, but especially the Yamato because of some of its unique characteristics. This is on the NA server though, hence why my name is renamed user, because Wargaming didn't like my previous name, so now I'm gonna have to think of a new name for my NA account. Still though, I'm pushing the left flank. As you can see, we got 2 DDs going to the left flank, so I might as well support them. I actually quite like this gap. You can see there's this narrow gap where you can get these extremely good field of fire right all the way to the enemy base, and if you push up close enough to this island on your right, they can't shoot your vulnerable broadside from the right either, which means you are able to isolate your target to only the guy in front of you, which is of course optimal. Amagami is pushing in surprisingly aggressively down the middle. I expect him to turn right, so I shoot accordingly, but it turns out he's actually slowing down and turning in, which is certainly an interesting decision and not something I expected. Doing it to juke one volley is okay, but he's actually slowing down completely, which I will admit completely juked my volley, but now he's extremely vulnerable to follow-up shot. So I'm not certain what exactly his plan was here, but I'm popping spotter plane to see if he's reversing. He is not, he's entirely stationary, so I see if I can punish him instead. The Grosse Kurfürst is giving me a lot of broadside, which of course means he is now an extremely tempting target, especially since dispersion doesn't seem to favor me on the Mogami at all. The problem on this flank though, as we can see right now, is that there is probably all 3 DDs on this flank. We have spotted 2, but there's 1 capping as well, so that means there's 3 DDs on this flank, and we are 4 versus at least 6 at this point on this flank. More importantly though, if we look at the minimap, we can see that our team is quite unopposed and is able to push heavily on BC. So obviously our decision is to start to reverse. There's no point pushing in because the majority of their team is here, whereas half our team is on the other side of the map. When you end up in situations like this, pushing into a numerical advantage is almost always a bad idea. You can push when you have equal numbers, but it's quite challenging because if you push into equal numbers, the enemy team of course has an advantage because if you're the one holding a position, you can position yourself in such a way that you put islands on your vulnerable flanks and you create crossfires for the enemy team to have to push into. So, and this is of course what the enemy team has done, and this is of course why pushing into this is not a good idea. Pushing, the defender almost always has an advantage in this game, and if we're outnumbered, pushing into that advantage is a terrible idea. So, of course, I am reversing, and I'm trying to delay them as much as possible. Note that whenever I spot a DD, I target him and I try to shoot him, because DDs are very strong, and as I said, they are a huge threat to the Yamato. I have 56k damage top right. I always look at the number if I don't get vision, and I think I did about 8k damage to that Kiev, so a very good volley in that sense. Even though it didn't look like we got any massive pens, that's still a lot of damage. Now, important note here is this Kurfürst. This Kurfürst that's hiding behind that island is actually a huge issue for me right now. And that is because the Yamato is exceptionally vulnerable to being locked into an angle. Now, what do I mean by locked into an angle? If there's a battleship in front of you, and you're a battleship as well, turning broadside means you give the enemy battleship a very juicy shot. And some battleships are more vulnerable than others, and Yamato in particular is the single most vulnerable tier 10 battleship to this. Now, the further away you are from a battleship, the less of an impact this locking on has, or being locked into an angle has. But at these distances that I was just earlier, like 12, 13 km away from the Kurfürst, being locked into an angle is a huge threat. Because, for example, if a Grosse Kurfürst gets locked into an angle with another battleship, he can turn away. If he turns away, sure, he'll get broadside, he'll maybe eat like 30-40k damage, but it's going to be penetration damage, which means he can heal 50% of it. So ultimately, he'll probably walk away after using his heal, maybe 20k health less, and he's able to disengage from this lock-on situation without any issues. A Conqueror can probably use his stealth to disengage, and even if he turns, the lowered citadel means it's unlikely that he will get much of a punishment. Even the Montana can turn away from a situation like this fairly well. Yamato, on the other hand, doesn't have the concealment to get away and has an exceptionally raised citadel compared to all the other tier 10 battleships, which means that if someone locks you into position in front of you and forces you to stay in that position, you pretty much have to reverse away. And that leaves you very vulnerable, because now your maneuvers are predictable, especially on a flank like this with this many DDs, and considering they have a North Carolina on our left flank and a Yamato and Lion still in their spawn, being caught in a stationary position would be very vulnerable, especially since the Yamato has this hexagon-shaped citadel, which means that if you try to angle even slightly, you risk being citadeled through the side of the nose, not just straight through the nose, which only a Yamato can do. So you really don't want to end up in situations where you're forced into this angle lock. And that was what I was afraid of because of that Kurfürst, and that's why I didn't really want to go into that situation at all. My team keeps insisting on pushing that flank, which I think is a terrible idea. They need to stop doing it. I reposition myself so I can help my team at B instead, because there's no point pushing into two battleships, one wide, one central, and two flanking DDs, one torpedo boat, one gunboat. That's so easy for them to deal damage in that position. And my DDs right now, well, they push themselves into they basically managed to make themselves surrounded. They are shot at from pretty much every single angle, and the enemy does have a Yugomo to spot them as well, which means they can't really outspot the enemy either. So the enemy team, my team has managed to really screw themselves over. That's why I'm pushing up here between these islands, because I want to try to help my Fletcher survive this situation that he's put himself into. Still loading AP, of course, until that changes. The fact that you can get AP pens, using AP on DDs is still the best tool because it's pretty stupidly powerful. I gotta keep in mind that the North Carolina might get shots at me, and I gotta keep in mind that the Yamato can overmatch my nose as well. But that's okay, I'm still full HP. That's because I haven't had any real opportunities to push in and absorb hits for my team. There hasn't really been any opportunities. I've been trying to look for them, I've been searching for them, and it's not always that easy to find them. It's one thing absorbing damage because you're in an intelligent position. It's another thing just pushing in and eating damage for no real reason. And pushing into A with my team would have been the exact that. Pushing in and eating damage for no real reason. Fletcher is gunboating the Yugoma, which is okay, but with the NC that close, it's very risky, and I wish he would just smoke up and disengage, because if he dies, this flank is absolutely guaranteed lost. I cannot hold it alone. The Yamato is not a good solo ship, and being forced to hold a flank alone against the DD will never work. So he's finally smoking up, but he's still moving. He needs to stop and get undetected. They have no radar, they have no hydro. All he needs to do is get undetected in his smoke, and once he's undetected, he can sail away to safety. As long as he's alive, able to torp and spot for me, he's still hugely valuable, even if he gives up the cap. But instead, he keeps sailing around and he keeps shooting. And that, of course, means that he will almost certainly die. And that's a huge problem for me, because once he dies, that left flank is going to get blown right wide open. And he does die, and that means I'm probably going to lose vision of this NC very soon. I've already lost vision of the Yugoma. And that means the A flank is gone at this point, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's not that big of a deal though, because we hold the cap advantage. So as long as I can maintain this cap advantage, we are still in a fairly good position. I even told him in chat, Fletcher just sit in smoke earlier, and then later on I asked, why didn't he just sit in the smoke and just get undetected? And the argument is that the Yugoma would torp it. Yes, but you don't have to sit in the smoke like all game. You sit in it just long enough for your concealment to disappear. You angle in and you sit just long enough for your firing debuff to disappear, and then you flee. Trying to fight a DD and a battleship in a DD is usually going to end up in tears, as it did there. Now, because of the Yugoma in A, I'm forced to reverse. And the NC that's undetected, and I can't do anything about him, I am forced to reverse and put the island between me and him. Of course, there's the threat of the Skorforst. I still don't know where he is, so I pop my spotter plane to give me some aerial vision of his location. And he's in fact pushing up this flank. See, there was the risk that he might push between the caps and straight up rush me. And if I'd pushed up in that case and he would have rushed down between the islands, I would have gotten caught from two flanks. And that's something the Yamato is so terribly bad at. It's one of the worst battleships at being caught in crossfires. It doesn't deal with it well at all. Now, I want to push up to help my team, but the problem is I don't know where the NC is, and I don't know where the Yugoma is. I have a good idea that the Yugoma is hunting me, so I'm doing a bit of a bait here, which is I accelerate, and then I stop. I accelerate and I stop because I notice the priority target number goes from 1 to 0. And this is kind of baiting the Yugoma into perhaps using his torpedoes, and this will give me information if he's actually hunting me. And it turns out my instincts are very good in this situation, and I managed to bait the Yugoma into launching both his volleys at me. However, there's a risk that this Yugoma is torpedo reload, because he fought the Fletcher and he didn't smoke up. I haven't seen the Yugoma smoke up once during this game. So the risk exists that this is a torpedo reload Fletcher, so I'm going full reverse. I can't afford to push because the NC is spotted on the minimap on my left. Pushing would put me into his broadside. And of course I can't sit still because the Yugoma, as we now found out, was in fact running torpedo reload. But I took this into account, this possibility, so I'm already reversing. I will probably eat, I doubt I'll be able to dodge them all. I will eat a couple of torps here, but that's okay since we've been unable to really tank damage so far, so we have a lot of health to spare, and eating a few torps isn't exactly the end of the world. I end up eating 2 torps, but in return I kill the Kurfürst. I'm showing a lot of broadside, but I figured that's okay because I'm getting behind the island, and surprisingly the Yamato is shooting HE. Now this is something I call the Royal Navy syndrome. The Royal Navy is very good with HE, So all these other people from all these other nationalities think that they should also be shooting HE in their battleships. And that's why a lot of them, you see a lot of these ships that should never touch HE, which are using it now. Like German battleships that have exceptionally weak HE, or in this case a Yamato that has amazing AP, but this guy is shooting HE. You see it a lot these days, and that's honestly just the Royal Navy syndrome. And as long as it's my enemies doing it, I'm pretty okay with it, because, well, it doesn't really do much to me. Especially if I'm playing a battleship, I can deal with it quite easily. Shots out on the Lion, deal no damage. I still don't really know where the NC is, but I need to get out of this position. I've been locked into this position for so very long that I just want to get out of it. I need to get into the combat itself, and the only way for me to really do that is to kind of angle away from the NC and just go wide. I have no other options here. If I try to push straight, well, I'll just put my broadside right in front of the NC. And the NC, even though it's a tier 8, I've talked about the amazing accuracy on that ship and the great penetration. He will have no issues citadeling me. And we do see him spotted on our left, pushing up, would have in effect put our broadside right in front of him. So this is one of those cases where I really want a tank, but once again, it's really hard for me to find an option, a possibility to do it. Now the Corvus on my team decided for some reason he really needed to push up, which I don't understand. And if you have a cap advantage, if you have 2 caps, the enemy has 1, why push? Especially in 4 versus 4. There is nothing to be gained unless the enemy is caught in an extremely vulnerable, or some individual player is caught in a vulnerable position that you can exploit, then maybe. But this guy, he was being shot at by all 4 of them. There was nothing to be gained from pushing in besides dying faster. And he says, Torps fire DDs, and I tell him to reverse, and then he says, I was dead. Well, it doesn't matter if you were dead. I mean, if you are going to die anyway, try to extend your life as long as possible. Reverse, survive. Yes, you will probably still die, but those seconds, that time you buy for your team can be extremely valuable, especially as long as we hold a cap advantage. Every second you buy for your team, when you have a cap advantage, is points for the team. And that's something people don't often understand. I'm giving a lot of broadside here, but that's because I really want to try to defend B. We need to hold B. The problem is though, our gearing is so very low, and once again I have a Yamato and an NC on my left. So if I try to turn in, which I really want to do at this point, I would love to turn in and push the cap and like try to defend it. But you see there's already AP running in from the left. We got the Yamato and we got an NC. And these are one of those cases where, once again, the other battleships could probably quite easily make this risky turn. But if I try it in a Yamato, I will probably get punished very hard. So I need to wait for an opportune moment to be able to turn hard left before I dare to do it. Because if I do it while they're waiting with their guns, I will get punished. Luckily though, the Lion is pointing full nose at me, and of course the Yamato's unique characteristics is that you can overmatch the nose and you can punish this kind of angle. A big volley just came in from the left, and there's the follow-up shells. That's my mark. They just shot. That's exactly what I was waiting for. Someone to shoot at me while I was angled, and now that he has shot, this is my time to go for this turn. Oh, and Yamato is extremely low. It was the Yamato that shot. I'm still gonna remain angled because the NC just shot. I'm kind of baiting this Lion to shoot me as well, because the Lion is very low HP, and if I could kill the Lion, that would be fantastic. I'm kind of giving a lot of broadside to the Lion, kind of daring him to shoot me, just so I can return fire and kill him. But the Lion is smartly holding his fire. I assume he's going to be repairing, and that's why he's refusing to fire. I pop my spotter plane to make sure I get vision and be able to shoot the Yamato, since we need to secure that kill, especially since the Yugumo just torped the gearing. So we just lost a very important player. That was our last DD. And now we were 2 versus 4, but I killed one of them, so we are 2 versus 3. With the Yamato dead and only the NC alive, it's time to take some risks. I start turning in as he shoots. I turn sharply enough that I should be able to dodge most of the volley. It's still a risky turn, and I could have gotten Citadel there, but ultimately I had the health to spare, and I was willing to make that trade to make sure that we secured the kill and didn't let him flee. Now though, we know the Yugumo was last seen at A. We know the Lion was last seen fleeing, so the Henry should be able to push the cap and secure it. The problem is though, I need to make sure nothing can kill him, and that includes the battleship, who is been healing up with that amazing Royal Navy heal. And of course, there's a DD on my left. There's still that Yugumo on my left. And he might be torping me at any point right now. So I'm sailing straight for a while, but very, very soon I'm kind of waiting until the very last moment because I need him to use his torpedoes. And now I start turning. Hard left turn. This is where my instincts start kicking in. It's time to start turning. And my spotter plane notices him, and my spotter plane actually sees his torps as well. But I was already turning because this is something I was expecting. I knew this guy would be torping me again. So I'm able to dodge all the torps in time. If I hadn't been turning in time, I would be eating significantly more. Note that I cancel my turn because I know the Lion cannot resist shooting a pretty much full broadside with my guns pointed the wrong way. I have to make sure though that his shells are HE. And it turns out they are, but note that if that had been AP, stopping my turn the way I did was very important because I didn't give him the flat perfect broadside that he could citadel me. Once he's shot, I continue my turn, because once again, remember, this is a torpedo reload Yugumo, so we knew there was a second volley of torps coming our way, so that's why we have to continue this turn to be able to dodge all the torpedoes. But it was very important to note there that when I started my turn, I aborted it intentionally halfway through, while remaining angled, because I knew the Lion would fire at me, and well, it was HE, so the angling didn't matter. But if it had been AP, that could have been the difference between being killed by citadels or surviving, because as I mentioned earlier in this commentary, the Yamato is extremely vulnerable to broadsides, especially at fairly short distances. Now though, all what that I've been doing has been distracting both of them. They've been focusing on me. In the meanwhile, the Henry, intelligently enough, went in and capped B just like I hoped. Now we have the cap advantage, we have point advantage, and there's no reason for me to do any sort of pushing. It's time to start kiting away. I never wanted to hunt the Yugumo, I just wanted to turn into his torps. And now I'm kiting away from the Yugumo, and I'm turning my guns on the Lion to make sure he can't just push in and bully my Henry 4. I can easily pen him through the nose, and I kite away from the Yugumo while trying to turn my guns for the Lion. The torps are coming my way, but it's too late, the game is already ending. If the game lasted a bit longer, I'd be able to kill the Lion, which would end it. Although, if there was more points available, I would probably eat some torps, but that was never really a risk because of the way the time was ticking down. And finally, of course, we get to the score screen. Battle time expired, and we would have won on point. It has by one because it's no longer.
How come they don't teach us the right way to get in shape? How come even when we stop eating carbs and start doing more cardio, we eventually hit a wall and stop making progress? How come it feels like some people can eat anything they want and still look great while you gain a pound from just looking at a restaurant menu? I'll tell you why. It's called somatypes. And I didn't just make that word up. This word was introduced to the public in the 1940s by Dr. William H. Sheldon, who was the professor of medicine at the University of Oregon Medical School and later became the director of research at the Biological Humanics Foundation in Cambridge. Now, I didn't know him personally, but I think it's safe to say that he was pretty smart by the fact that his research has been used for many, many years to help people understand their bodies better and to level the playing field or even turn it in their favor in the battle against their weight. So what I figured out was a way to use his research and create a modernized tool to make figuring out your somatype and getting your dream body easy. No more starvation diets, no more living on the treadmill. I'm talking a calculated approach that has been proven by science to work.
See, like, oh, conqueror in the game.
Jesus.
Are you fucking shitting? Oh my.
Where are we going? A?
I think I'm heading B.
Okay.
Oh, there's a carrier.
do you
here,
wanna
for
go?
fuck's sake. Spot on my tools. I think I might go A then.
No, I mean,
I mean, depends on where Potent is going.
no, he's going B, man.
I'll do support B then.
Alright, I will go there as well. We
Aren't you a
have
super
battleships
tester?
at A.
Nope. Nope, CC.
I mean, it's not that good because you go maybe goes B and then we have 2 DDs in B. And that's, I don't know. I would rather go A.
That's an unfair tier 8 against tier 10. It's been in the game since like.
And he's even a
He's
he's
an
even
NC.
a NC, man.
And guess he hasn't experienced the times when you could face like tier 10 go to tier 7. Pensacola versus Montana were the fucking glory days.
Oh man.
Gotta dodge 12 shells in a Pensacola. That was fun.
Today we had a game where Scharnhorst was together with a NC in the division, and in the enemy team a Bliska, a Mayhem, and a North Carolina. And we were in a T10 game. Sounds about right. So where's the Conqueror, man?
Ognivoy A.
Oh, I slowed down and dodged. That Moskva has incoming fire or some shit.
Keep his fighters away from me, please, carrier. There's a Conqueror. What the fuck is he doing?
Sniping from 29 kilometers.
Yeah. Okay, so now where are we
Fuck,
going?
of course that plane has to stop right there so he can spot me.
Okay, now where are we going?
I hit him on 28 kilometers. just to show him the middle finger. Fuck off.
On my way to correct that. Okay. Are we going over to see then, I assume? Am I just gonna open it? I'm just gonna open it. Iowa's.
These fucking spotter planes, man.
Him on the flank.
Oh, Shima on the left, Jesus.
Can anyone annoy this Iowa a bit? Got a fire on the
Yeah,
Iowa.
me in a second. If he's overturning.
Damage con, insta damage con. Iowa.
Hmm. I got the planes.
Are you coming this direction? No, he's slowing down.
Kinda wanna push that Iowa, but I'm fucking worried about this Gross Force that we should spotting behind it.
Yagumo, stop reversing, please.
Do we know where this Code Force is going?
I have absolutely no idea.
Anti-aircraft gun crews are on normal alert.
Benson torpedoed it, you might know.
3 people targeting me.
Tempted to just try and cap C from under their noses. Damage con Iowa.
Why are my shells landing too far from me? I don't get it.
How fast is the Conqueror?
Oh wait, 30 knots I think. Or slightly slower, I don't know. Cap C. Hey. Hey bro, what's the plan now? That carrier keeps annoying that shimmer.
I did, but he's missing his drops. Whoa, what the fuck are these drops? 20 km drops?
Okay, let's try and
Careful,
farm
Flammo,
this
Conqueror is shooting you.
He can't see me, but... Oh my lord, really?
He can?
He can't
Can
see
he?
me.
Oh no, he's shooting the NC, sorry. It's like, it's hard to know if one ship can shoot fucking 30 kilometers and who's he's aiming.
Yeah, I'm getting real tired of the Shima now. I just ate the fucking 20 km drop from him, because
Oh man.
I started accelerating when he said he's shooting me. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm fucking unspotted. I don't need to accelerate.
I thought he would shoot you, man.
Hey, this Grosser first has 25 torpedoes heading his way.
Man, what the shit?
Why is no one shooting the fucking Shima?
No, you gamer, why did you smoke torpedoes over here now?
I have Ognovo in front of me.
Is he seriously just gonna go ahead and dodge all of them? For fuck's sake, you gamer. Okay, damage con, Grosser. Team's just dying around us. Nice, we got killed back. Oh, Grosser detonated your gamer. Trying to get rid of this Grosser. Wow, really?
What?
I think I'll have to go and kill the Shimmer by myself.
My game's glitched! Nothing fucking works, I'm gonna alt-tab it. What the f- Nice! My game! Fuck! Nice fucking game! Good design!
What happened? Did it crash again?
Nothing works. Nothing fucking works.
Try and restart.
Okay, it switches ammo. Let's see, can I shoot? Oh, it fired! Good fucking game, yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm capping C.
Only took half an hour for my game to fire and I lost the fucking 10k health because of that. Nice. I like that. Good balance, yes. Good design.
You're gonna just stay alive, man.
Okay. So, GG. But the Conqueror doesn't have tops, right?
Nope.
Haha.
No, no, no.
Okay, good. He can't penetrate me from the front. That's a good sign.
Oh, can't. They deliberately gave it 457, so you can't hold them like the Yamato can.
Yeah, I'm helping you with them.
Benson's low.
how are you supposed to play with these fucking shitheads? Seriously?
Is that Conqueror, is he gonna beach? Yes, he is. Very nice. Oh, I can go down the Benson.
Yeah, you can easily. But be careful, they still have a Moskva that was not spotted for a long time.
Where the fuck did he go?
There he is.
Why don't really open it with me?
That fucking Conqueror heal. Oh my god, that's balanced.
Here comes a click. Miss. Torpedoes on the way on the Conqueror, but they're spotted, so I don't know how these are gonna go there. Yeah, Conqueror's gonna re-beach himself.
No, he's not beached.
Okay. Well, they're just taking cover from behind. Hey, do you want a smoke screen, Fleming?
Sure, if you can spare one. I'll just
Yeah.
go to work on the Conqueror.
Okay, the torpedo belt seems shit on the Conqueror. He's flooding.
Put it in front of you. I'll put it in front of you.
Alright, yeah.
Yeah, Conqueror's flooding.
Actually, I don't think there's any need for it, but thank you anyway. Oh fuck, lost vision.
Come on, NC, turn in.
What's this group here doing? Even when they've got like 3 retards on their team, it's still so.
Conqueror survived.
Okay. I'm gonna go in.
Amazing, look at his HP.
Yep. That fucking heal. Jesus Christ.
Midway, you want to turn around instead of fighting in.
I think they need to implement a new achievement.
Kill Conqueror.
No. The double, what is it? When you repair like, the double dreadnought. Repair 60,000 HP of your ship.
Midway is actually under fire.
The aim of our NC is next level bad. He's standing broadside in front of the Conqueror.
Okay, now what? Should I go Cap A or should I go help on C? I think I'm gonna go help on C.
Yeah, go help my team. I'll push A. Oh wait, you said yeah, help on C, yeah, exactly. That fucking Conqueror though, looks perfectly balanced to me.
If Freddy goes down, we're gonna lose a lot of things. Still a Moskva loitering around somewhere.
Yeah, he's back in their spawn, he was spotted in their spawn quite recent. It's around here. Now imagine 4 of them in a team. Oh god. And I mean, that guy grounded, and in general potatoed a lot. Imagine someone good angling and tanking and shit. Like, Jesus.
We're gonna lose Friday as well. We're gonna be behind on points.
I got up to the midway now.
Okay. There's Moscow.
No damage good.
Moving toward me.
I mean, we will win this anyways. Flammo will kill the midway. Maybe Potent will kill the Hindenburg, or the midway will kill the Hindenburg. And yeah.
Hindenburg flooding. Hindenburg looks like it's flooding. I'm gonna smoke it. Okay, this one.
That is some spicy fire RNG I'm getting right now.
Fire.
Yeah, I'm not getting one.
Oh shit. I don't think the midway has any fighters left.
Who's there? Midway's trying to spot me.
Just run.
I'm gonna land torps on this mosque.
Finally.
How many plane kills do you have, Flammo?
Not many.
Midway's keep. We can get the midway spotted. Which is pretty good.
Can these planes please die? Ah, finally.
That bitch is taking the torp right on the nose.
These are some intense games today.
So hard to carry these potatoes, man.
Man, feels bad, Flammo. You won't be able to kill that midway in time.
Nope. He keeps border humping and angling, so I can't get citadels.
Oh my
I
god.
had really terrible fire RNG on him. Like, really terrible hard fire RNG. I kept spamming him for something like 40 seconds without a single fire. Because I needed to keep one fire on him so I can't just spam planes. Hello everyone. Since my last Conqueror vid was mostly focused on, well, giving an introduction of the ship and in general my opinions and so forth, going through all the details, I figured I would post another vid, this time just a game in it. In that sense, no comparisons, no super detail, but just your average game in it. The first thing, of course, that this ship has is the insane range. Now, the shells are very slow, but if you do happen to catch people who aren't paying attention, you can get some pretty damn surprisingly powerful volleys at long range, because once again the accuracy is very, very good. In this game I'm against all different tier 10 battleships, which is what I think makes this a pretty good example. I'm against the Yamato, Amontana and Kurfürst, so there's plenty of opponents to choose from. You might notice able to punish the broadside Yamato, and that's of course always satisfying. In fact, I have found that, because I don't know if it's because of the plunging fire or what the reason is, but I think I have felt that I have been able to more consistently punish broadside Yamatos in the Conqueror than I have in the Montana, because one of the common things I experience when I shoot broadside Yamatos at extreme ranges in the Montana is that I get a bunch of bounces and shatters, whereas the Conqueror, I assume because of the plunging fire, has been more consistent in punishing them. Now, the Große Kurfürst appears to be pushing in. You note that I had 4 people targeting me there. So I took a break from shooting. I just stopped shooting in general because I can see Missouri is pushing up on the left. There's a bunch of stuff pushing up on the left. They're pushing on the right, and I got ships right in front of me. So I figured this was a bit too much pressure because you notice how aggressive I am playing. I'm almost inside B with my battleship, and the game has barely started. But this is of course one of the great advantages of this extreme stealth that you have in this ship, the ability to disengage whenever you want, and in this case a bit too much pressure, so I decided it's time to disengage. I do catch the Ivar reversing behind island, and even though I only got 4 penetrations on him, I actually dealt 16,000 damage, so of course the AP damage per shell is very, very impressive. And it looks like this Kurfürst is pushing in, so I switch to HE as I turn away. That's something I did highlight in my commentary, and that's something I actually quite like with this Royal Navy line, is that you are very efficient at dealing with angled battleships in these ships, especially the high tier ones, the Conqueror and the Lion, and I think the tier 7 one has an especially high fire chance as well, which makes it very good at dealing with them, the King George 5, but I will cover those 2 later. Still though, the Kurfürst tries pushing in while angled, so I switch to HE, and of course you can see not just is the HE Alpha, of course, very impressive. That was what, 9.5k damage, 9.3. Also, of course, the fire chance is what makes it so very consistent and so very powerful at punishing these attempts to push in nose first. The Neptune, of course, does his fair share of damage, but as long as he remains angled, I'm just gonna be raining down this HE fire on him. Even if you don't start any fires, well, although it feels like you almost start one every volley, the consistent damage is what makes it very, very attractive in dealing. It doesn't matter if it's a Kurfürst or Montana or a Yamato, you of course you can't overpen or overmatch any of them. So I tend to automatically switch to HE in the ship against these. In some other ships, in other battleships, I'm significantly more hesitant to do this because the HE fire chance is much, much lower. But with the impressive fire chance of 48%, which of course with the tier 10 resistance is about 24%, with 12 guns you have a very high chance, and you're quite consistent at starting these fires. It looks like he is giving broadside, and I'm switching to AP here. You note, of course, my reload is down to 24 seconds. 2 fires with that volley, so, well, if the Neptune hadn't killed him, he would have died to my fires. My reload is down to 24. You already run the reload mod, or I already recommend the reload mod on this ship since because the range is already so insanely good at 24 km, so there's absolutely no need. I in general don't run range mod on any of my tier 10 battleships. What you see here, it might look a bit wonky, but what I'm doing here is I'm tapping the M key. When you press the M key, you of course go into the map, the top-down view map. But if you tap the M key, you abort the animation just before it goes up, and it returns back to your ship. And you can use this to gain this kind of bird's eye perspective of the ship, and that's what I did. I tapped the M key to get an idea of which way the Montana was sailing, and then I shot him before he came around the corner, using the information gained from tapping the M key, and this way I was able to shoot him before he even popped out. I only did, 8k damage to him, but it's a tactic I use quite often. Kaba turns in at the very last moment, so instead of eating a ton of damage, he only eats 6k. And of course, he eats a full penetration, even though he wasn't really that angled, and that's something I see quite often in these Royal Navy battleships. The plunging fire, of course, is excellent at dealing with this kind of issue. In fact, I've noticed that this plunging fire has a lot of advantages. For example, citadeling Hindenburgs. I've been able to do it at almost point blank range. I think from 4 km I was able to double Citadel Hindenburg, which is something a lot of battleships struggle with, but the Conqueror is able to do. So another advantage in the favor of this ship. The Kaba leaves his smoke, and well, if he leaves his smoke and sails it open, he obviously becomes my priority target right away. Did I predict him correctly? I want him to turn a bit more left, because that's what I'm expecting. He did turn, but a bit late. But once again, only 2 hits, but one of them was a full penetration, which is a massive additional 4k chunk. And when you consider that the Kaba, even with the health perk, only has 26k, that 4k chunk is a pretty damn big deal. Another thing though worth noting there is that I lost a turret there, and that's also something that happens surprisingly often. In fact, often enough that I've been strongly considering slotting preventive maintenance on this ship, because you might not see it from this angle, but if you look at my turrets, the turret face is actually completely flat. And the turret face being completely flat means that it doesn't really bounce or ricochet shells the same way other battleships tend to do. So I feel like in a brawling situation, it's probably a very valid tactic to target the Conqueror turrets, because they seem to get knocked out very, very easily. And that's something I'm certainly going to experiment with when these ships come out, and that's targeting the turrets. I think they might be a weakness. Upgrading to the 457mm guns gives you a better armor on the turret face, but the turret face is still flat on those as well. And ultimately though, even if you do end up losing turrets, these guns are of course so much better than the 457s that I would still use these, but it does give me ideas of a potential counter in case you do face a Conqueror at close ranges in another battleship. I think especially a Yamato targeting these turrets might be able to completely destroy them, because that flat turret face is a very clear weakness, and I've had turrets knocked out much more frequently in this ship than in any other tier 10 battleship. So targeting turrets might very well be a very real weakness for this Conqueror. You might notice that, well, if those of you who watch my stream would notice that the position I'm in right now is something I don't really recommend for battleships. You're kind of surrounded, and I always say you should never get yourself in a position where you're surrounded in a battleship, because that's terrible. However, the thing is, the Conqueror, you kind of can get away with these situations. Well, I am turning away now since there's a Kagero in the cap that's spotting me. But the reason why you kind of get away with these situations in the Conqueror is this. I can get undetected. Kind of whenever I want to, I can get undetected in the ship. And this allows you to get away with these kind of maneuvers that you normally wouldn't get away with, but the Conqueror is able to do it. Now, I am sailing towards the enemy spawn here, which is something I don't really like, because I feel it puts me out of position a bit. But the reason for this is, well, first of all, there's a DD in B, and I can't really do much about him. I need our Chapayev to move up, and I need our Z-23 to move up. I basically need something that can actually deal with the DD. And second of all, there's a Yamato that's kind of humping the border here, and I want to get rid of this Yamato, because having a Yamato on your broadside is not a lot of fun, especially at long ranges, when he can actually get that plunging fire and punish my Citadel. I want this guy dealt with, and he looks like he is sailing all the way to the border. I am holding my fire. This is of course, once again, kind of unique to the Conqueror thanks to the great stealth. You have these options to wait for the perfect shot and remain entirely undetected. You can just sit there and wait for that perfect opportunity, even if you're kind of in the middle of enemy territory, the way I am right now. I think I took too much lead, because I didn't take into account how much speed he lost. Yeah, I took too much lead. I took too much lead. I didn't take into account just how much speed he lost from getting the edge debuff. When you hit the edge, you lose, like, is it 3/4 of engine power or something? So losing all that speed threw my aim off. Now though, I know how slow he is, and of course these plunging shells at 15 km on a broadside Yamato are extremely powerful. And well, that's, first of all, it gives me a Citadel and some pens, 16.5k damage, and my back turrets finish him off with another 22k. So the AP performance of these 419s is in my opinion just fantastic. I've had no issues dealing with any ship, and they have been surprisingly strong against many ships, and that's of course one of the reasons why I consider the Conqueror to be extremely strong. For those that have watched my commentaries before and who are familiar with the way I rate battleships, I tend to highly value the gun performance, because I think it's one of the key importances of a battleship, being able to punish any sort of enemy mistakes, and in general just having consistent guns is something I highly value. I'm shooting at the Mogami. At these ranges, the Mogami kind of probably can turn away and mitigate a lot of the damage and avoid the Citadel, but it wasn't really that, well, of course I wanted to kill him, but it was more the fact that I wanted him to turn away, and because you can't allow a Mogami to just happily sail around your broadside or sail around giving you full broadside, because a Mogami has an absolute ridiculous amount of firepower, especially the type of firepower that you don't really like in the Conqueror, and that's of course IFHE, HE spam. And because you're coated in 32mm armor, he can deal a lot of heavy consistent damage to you. So giving him a bit of a scare, reminding him that if you give me broadside I can delete you, is something I quite like doing in this ship. This Iowa is trying to angle against, notice the Montana is angling against him and trying to angle against me at the same time. So I aim a bit higher, so I get plunging fire on his superstructure instead of shooting his belt that could probably bounce it at this angle. And that does finish him off. And let's see if I can get undetected now, once again. Even with the fire on, I'm actually able to get undetected here. So that does speak to the excellent concealment of this ship. I'm still not entirely certain if these ships are going to be keeping the super heal. I did speak with Wargaming today, and the Nilsson is actually going to keep its super heal for tier 7. So, well, I've kind of given up on tier 7 in general. I mean, I don't think it needs the super heal. I think it's strong enough without it, but that's going to be even more power creep at tier 7. But tier 7 in general is a tier I've just given up on. I mean, we have Belfast, we have Flint, we have Saipan. Like that entire tier has already gone to shit, so I kind of don't care. If they decide to add an overpowered battleship to the mix, then whatever. It is all that entire tier is already a premium mess in that sense, but obviously not something I'm too big of a fan of. But I will say though that the Nelson does get a full recommendation from me. I always recommend, even if I don't like the fact that they're doing this to the ship, I of course objectively will always recommend a ship I consider very strong. And with the Nelson keeping that super heal it has right now and it not being nerfed, of course the Nelson gets a full recommendation from me, because, well, that's how I treat ships objectively. If they're strong, they get a recommendation. If they're weak, then they don't. And in this case, the Nelson gets, of course, a big full recommendation, because it's going to be possibly the best tier 7 battleship with that super heal and the combination of the stealth and all these things. Missouri should die to the Montana here. I've been helping the Montana fight him a bit, nailing him with some good heavy punishing volleys. St. Louis is giving me full broadside, and of course, even though they have spaced armor, if they give broadside to you, you can quite easily punish them, as he finds out giving broadside when he kills the Montana. And the Mogami is getting pretty damn close, something you don't want to do, because the closer you get to the ship, the less time you have to react to these pretty slow AP shells, and the less time you have, well, angling really against these shells, especially in a squishy cruiser like the Mogami. Yeah, that's not really gonna work out. He tries to turn in and angle, but against these AP shells, it doesn't help him, and I citadel him and to switch the Conqueror of your anti-air, and in those cases